Hello, YouTube. Good morning, YouTube. Testing. Is this thing on? All right,
Yeah.
let's post that. And now, hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on HawkFanatic.com. It is Thursday, December the 12th, 9:15 a.m. Central Time. I am Rob Howe, joined as always by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. We got a lot to talk about today. I've got a lot written down. Scott and I went over it. We'll see what we can get to. We don't want to run this like into Friday, so we'll try to get through these topics pretty quick. Um, how was the trip to Indy, Scott? Good
Very,
game.
yeah, it was a great game. It was nice to see some offense. And
It's nice to
uh,
see a competitive game.
yeah, I haven't seen one of those for a few years over there. And it was nice to see some offense, both teams scoring points,
Oh, it's a
45,
novel idea.
37. Yeah. And, when it was 28 to 10 in the second quarter, I thought, oh boy, here we go. This is going to be a blowout. But Penn State showed me a lot. I mean, they showed me that they're not just a, a paper contender, type of thing. I mean, they show me a lot, and of course, Oregon has incredible speed, and in a dome like that, it really
Yeah.
showed up. So the only thing was, as always, when you have a championship game and then the next day comes awfully quick. I mean, I got to the hotel after 3, probably sleep at 4, hit the road by 8. I stopped in Peoria at 11, for the playoff,
Joe.
announcements and stuff.
Yeah.
So I was at a Buffalo Wild Wings in Peoria from 11 to 6:30, writing about bowl announcements, about the playoff and all that kind of stuff, I had to throw proposals on where and when I'm going to go to bowl games. So it's just, yeah, it was a long day. And then, oh, by the way, I got to drive another 2.5 hours after that. So it's like I kind of joked, I've been in Buffalo Wild Wings like twice as long as I actually slept. So
Hopefully you left him a good tip.
I did. 100% tip. So I felt bad for the waitress
Did
because
you have just one? You had to have switched the shift there for
later
them.
on, like the last hour and a half, they kind of ignored me once I paid my bill,
Yeah.
and because one of the people's like, hey, she's gonna take off. I'm like, okay, please give me the bill. Because I appreciated her because I wasn't hungry and I was just like, she asked me for anything, well, sure you don't want a refill? Yeah, I'll take a refill. And so I think I spent about 20 and gave her 20, type of thing. So
We've uh we've got plenty of time to talk about the playoff and the Music City Bowl as well. If you've been living under a rock as a Hawkeye fan and don't know that Iowa plays Missouri in the Music City Bowl December 30th. Um, that's the news. That's what we found out Sunday after the playoffs were announced. Everybody got their non-playoff bowl invites, and I think it was. We'll talk about this a lot more at moving forward, but just from a logistical standpoint, Scott, we talked about this last week. It looked like it was going to be Tampa ReliaQuest, but I guess we didn't see Michigan beating Ohio State, and that changed, right? Didn't that knock Iowa down?
it wasn't as much that as it was the result on Saturday night in the ACC championship. As
Uh,
of as of Friday, and my conversation was pretty ironclad that the expectation was SMU was going to win. And if that was the case, it was going to be Illinois, South Carolina in the Citrus Bowl, which it ended up being. And then the ReliaQuest Bowl was going to take Florida against Iowa because they wanted Florida local. They had a surge to end the season. They played pretty well. There was a lot of enthusiasm for it, and they didn't want Florida to play Michigan because they've already had Iowa's played a lot of Florida games, but Michigan's played more in bowls, and they just wanted to get away from that. So they thought, okay, Iowa, Florida, probably they expected maybe to be more beatable. I don't know, but still, they thought Iowa deserved it. Well, when SMU lost on a 56-yard field goal, and it kind of threw everything in flux because then Clemson got in the tournament, and then after that, it was okay. Will Alabama leapfrog SMU or vice versa? And so they had a lot of contingency plans. Well, the Citrus already mapped out with South Carolina, Illinois. They thought it was a good matchup. South Carolina is a really good traveling team, and decided, okay, we're gonna just stick with this and grit our teeth. Bama's there. Well, Alabama was there, and they still just said, okay, pass. Well, you're the ReliaQuest Bowl. You can't pass on Michigan, Alabama.
No.
I mean, those two iconic, and the thing is, if Alabama was playing Iowa, not that they would totally check out, but it wouldn't have nearly the overall global interest. It just wouldn't. Or if it would have been Florida, Michigan, it's probably the same deal. But those two helmets, they played in the Rose Bowl earlier this year in the playoff. They couldn't pass that up. So then it came, then Iowa came down. And then the only, it was what was weird was throughout the whole week of doing those bowl projections every day, talking to bowl scouts, figuring out things, the only one I was just completely wrong on was the Music City Bowl. Of all the teams, I was kind of made fun of for that. It's like, by Stu, it's like, can you believe it? The one who messed up is Iowa. Yeah. And because I'd been hearing Ole Miss.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be Missouri. And hey, that's good. I think the matchup's good. It's not one that on paper that you look at and you go, I don't know about this. Like Alabama, you probably would be, but this one you think Iowa plays well, it could be a pretty good game. They've got a lot of talent. They had an opt out, the first round opt out like Iowa did, but
They had a couple, right? Didn't they have an offensive lineman opt out as well? That's like a top couple round pick, I thought.
yeah, I think you're right.
And the receiver, Luther Burden, right?
Yeah, he's tremendous. And and you think, well, okay, they lost their best receiver. Iowa lost its best cornerback. They lost their, and then Iowa, of course, lost, top probably 10 Heisman guy in voting in Johnson. So, I think overall it's a good matchup for the Hawkeyes. I mean, and it's a drive for a lot of people, which is good. Nashville seems to work with the Iowa culture of its fan base, and you're playing an opponent that, yeah, it might, there's, you don't really like them. You never really play them because they either back out of bowl games or regular season matchups, but
Yeah.
but you do recruit against them. They're not that far away.
Close drive for them too, or closer drive for them too. And
Yeah.
it's their first time in this bowl too. And
Mhm.
Music City's been wanting to get them. So it should be a good crowd.
Mhm.
Should be well viewed on TV. And we'll talk a lot more about it moving forward. But we're going to dive in with what Scott and I were at last night, and that was a packed Carver Hawkeye Arena that was warm inside and cold as hell from the parking lot to the walk-in to the arena.
Yes.
One of those cold nights where you're just like, it's going through my bones, but
Mhm.
hot inside and really good game. Iowa wins it, comes back from 10 down in the second half, and finds a way. And as disappointing as Saturday was in Brooklyn, Scott, with 30 turnovers and a 10-point loss to Tennessee, it was nice to see a bounce back from this Hawkeye team that we're still trying to figure out with so much turnover. And Jensen's still trying to figure it out. She was trying to find the right match last night, the right selection of players to put in there, and it worked. And I'll let you throw your thoughts in here. For me, the difference in that game was Sid. Sydney Afalter, the other star players that you expected to play well, they were letting her shoot. She made baskets. She played defense. She rebounded. She took charges. It was the Sydney Afalter doing the Kate Martin impression last night almost. And that's what this team needs.
She fits that profile, and she, because she's Southside Sid and she's all of that, I mean, she's a tough-minded leader. I mean, even, going back to the summer, early fall, who's your leader? Oh, it's Sid, and she is the one that is the enforcer, but she's the, but you got to be able to produce on the floor. You can't just do it in practice and what have you. And she was able to do that. That was her first really big game, this year because, and, one point that Jan Jensen made after the game that I thought was really poignant is when you look at the big three, Lucy Olson, Hannah Stolke, and Sydney Falter, they really haven't played much together at all. Hannah was, had knee surgery in the off season and didn't really get going until September. Then Sydney Falter had knee surgery and she didn't really get going until early November, at the same time. And then Lucy was trying to get involved with them. And then she had that big cut down in Cancun. So this was the first time that they were able to kind of all work together. And I think, overall it was, you could see that there's still a lot of work to be done there, but they produced when they had to, because that was a really good team that they played, and they've got their own struggles and they know about them. And that's as good of a post as you'll play all year in Audie Crooks. But
Certainly the most unique.
oh yeah, no
It's
question.
she's a one of one.
The way she's built, Rob, I mean, and not to mean this, certainly not in a mean way, but the way she's built, you expect her to play a certain way, kind of bully in the bull in the China shop type, physical, not be, but she's a finesse player with that size, but you got to respect the size too, because she is very strong and agile. And Jan described kind of her Dirk Nowitzki fadeaway. That's just impossible to defend. And you try to double her and she passes out of it, and she's a really good passer. So you got to be cognizant of that. So you're like, well, we should just leave her one-on-one because you don't want her to pass out of it and then hit an open three. But a kind of a hidden player to me who had a really big night was Taylor Stremlow, and she had a steal on her. I mean, she played 26 minutes, 6 points, 3 assists, 2 steals, just really
He's the next one.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
when Kate, Sydney, Taylor Stremlow is in that same mold. It seems like they have one of those kind of in the pipeline.
Yeah, exactly. And, before that, you could probably say Kathleen Doyle was similar. I mean, different type of player on the floor, but man, she had the same intensity. And, even Jan described her about, because, as we know, Jan likes to talk. And afterwards, she kept going on about some of the stuff. She talked about like Megan, like the environment, because it was as good as any environment as last night. But then she talked about Kathleen Doyle and how she likes to, she get on the floor and kind of clap her hands, together, like, okay, it's on. And you see that, and you see that with Taylor Stremlow and the 3 other freshmen who played all had big moments at certain times in the game. And, certainly Aaliyah Guyton, big time 3, and, 2 of them, but, the second one was just massive. And, you see a bright future here. She's got a deep bench the way she's playing them. But it was very successful, I thought.
Yeah, Iowa was, what were they in first half from 3? They were 4, was it 4 of 15 from in the first half, and then 4 of 10 in the second half. So shot it much better in the second half. Iowa State led that game, Scott, for almost 33 minutes.
Yeah.
That's one of those gut check games that you can build on going forward with a team. We talked about all the freshmen. That's a confidence booster. That's a build on game, because Sunday's game will not be easy. Michigan, this is not your father's Michigan. It's a good Michigan State team. You look at the metrics, they're like top 5, top 10 in the country in almost everything. So very important game last night to give you a little momentum going into your first Big Ten game of the year.
Right. They needed it, especially after what happened on Saturday. That, they were right there with Tennessee throughout, and then they kind of pissed the game away. And they had 30 turnovers, and it just – late, gave up a big run late, and it just kind of, spiraled out of control. And you're coming back and you're playing an intense rivalry game against a really good team that's ranked as well. And, what do you got? When you have a new team, which this basically is, and a new head coach, you've got to figure out how to engineer victory against teams like this. And for them to be down the way they were, be down a couple different times at double-digit points early on, it spiraled out of control very early. They were down like what 16-6 at one point,
And if
and
Iowa State could have made some foul shots, it would have been a lot worse.
oh yeah, they were 6 of 16 from the free throw line, and early on it was dreadful.
Bad, awful.
Yeah, I mean, Audie, that's not her strength.
No.
But you, but the way that they were able to fight, hit good shots, play defense, which this team is much better defensively than we've
Oh, yeah.
seen in recent years, and for all the plaudits that we've given Caitlin, which she richly deserves as the time athlete of the year, not by gender, athlete of the year. Lucy is a much better defender. It's not
Yeah.
close. And then everybody else is buying into that too, which is very helpful. So I think this is the type of game that they can really build on. Gives them confidence, shows some toughness. It allows the young players that, whether they played a lot like Taylor Stremlow or the other three who played between 8 and 7 minutes, the opportunity. This is what it's going to be like. Here's how you make your impact. And then, and then of course, Hannah Stolke had some turnovers, but then later on, when it needed to happen, she made it happen too.
Yeah, 10 players played at least 7 minutes. So that's 10 players that have ownership in what happened last night and can feel good about it. And that's how you kind of build the chemistry and a rotation. And you talked about the turnovers, Scott. 9 turnovers last night. Iowa State had 21 of them. Big change from Saturday. Points off turnovers, Iowa 24-6 edge there. Big part of the game. Turnovers cost them on Saturday. Other way around last night. Again, that's another sign of growth.
Yeah. And down the stretch, I think it was like 5 out of 6 possessions for Iowa State ended in a turnover when Iowa was surging. And, that in part was forced by defense. They were able to generate stops, generate turnovers. And, I think Iowa State got a little flustered. The crowd was intense. I keep that decibel reader, and I don't play it like the whole time. I just kind of wait for you hear the big shot or you see it. It's here it is. Okay, pull it out, push the button. And with Aaliyah Guyton's 3, it went to 115. I mean, that's Caitlin Clark territory. The loudest ever recorded at Carver. When wrestling was like 117. I think it was Peyton
Was that
Sanford.
Penn State wrestling?
Yeah.
Iowa, Penn State, yeah.
Yeah, it was when the
I
guy
know
was
the
there like
yeah.
7 years. Michael
Yeah.
Kemmer,
Yeah.
was able to get a takedown reversal in overtime against Mike Hall. And then I think it was 116 was when Peyton Sanford hit that shot against Michigan State
Mhm.
to send it into overtime a few years ago with the Stair game.
Mhm.
And then the loudest though I ever recorded was Caitlin Clark's shot against Indiana, which was 119. But when you're 115, I mean, it's ear piercing. You
Yeah.
can't hear the PA announcer. I already have like tinnitus, because I play heavy metal music too damn loud. And I have since I was in my early teens. So, it's like,
Yeah. It's static.
yeah.
But yeah, it was a great environment. Great to see. It's great for basketball. I know people say women's basketball. Um, it's basketball, right? If you're going to watch dunks and high flying acts, you're not going to see that. But if you're looking for fundamental basketball, you're looking for teamwork, things like that, just the beauty of the game. The women's game has that. It's fun to watch, and it's good to see more people doing that. And that's going to segue us into the next topic, which is tonight. Again, it's Thursday, December 12th, so this won't have a long shelf life because Iowa men play host to Iowa State tonight. Iowa State is the number 3 ranked team in the country, so a different dynamic. Iowa is not ranked. So this is a much different dynamic than it was last night when you had 18 versus 21. That being said, I pointed this out to Scott before we started recording, and you guys can check it out as well. Plenty of seats available tonight, which I'm not sure I ever thought I would see that, Scott, for a Cy-Hawk men's basketball game at either arena. And it's kind of a commentary on where Iowa is this year. You've been to games, I've been to games. The crowds are as small as I can remember. This is not going in the right direction. And if you can't sell out or basically sell out other than singles, an Iowa State Iowa game, I mean, you got to evaluate shit.
You have to. It's if this turns out the way that maybe is expected, which is, I mean, what was it? 2 days ago, there were 4,000 tickets available. I don't know what the number is now. I'm sure there's been
And that was like a bat signal for the Cyclone fans.
Yeah, right. And it should be. You rub your rival's face in the dirt. I mean, they were playing the most important home football game of their existence against Kansas State when it was 9 degrees outside, and they didn't fill Jack Trice, and people were like, "Oh, he filled the Kinnick, and you guys can't do that." No, payback is a what,
Yeah.
and it's deserved because the arena is a lot smaller and it's not cold in there, and you're playing your biggest rival, or one of them. I guess Illinois would probably count as the other for me, but you've got all those factors and you can't sell out, and you can't even get to 80%. I mean, 80% is 12,000, so it indicates some issues. One, is your team any good? That's where it always starts. And I think this team's pretty good. I'm not going to put them in the Final Four, but I think competitively on the floor, they match up well with just about anybody. I mean, Michigan, they got down big time the other day, down 20-4 right out of the gate. And then they came back and tied it up. And it was just kind of a, last second deal that they lost on the road. They're averaging 86, so they're exciting. They're playing, they're scoring points as they always do. And they've got good players. They've got players that resonate to me, that they, when you look at an Owen Freeman and you look at a Peyton Sanford, they're salt of the earth, Midwestern kids. One's from Iowa, one's from Illinois. They matter. So what is it? Apathy is settled in. You can't remove it. You've got to make a major change in order to remove it, or completely win games that floor people, and that could include tonight. And if it does, then there's going to be a shot of adrenaline to the fan base, and maybe it jars them a little bit. But I've never been the type that tries to spend other people's money. I think people are smart enough to figure out if they want to spend it themselves. And but I look for reasons, not excuses. And the reasons are that people are kind of checked out on this men's basketball program, and they have been for a couple of years. And it's the disappointments in March that have kind of brought out the Eeyore feelings that are prevalent among Iowa fans, like, we're never going to get there, and you know what, when you have the greatest scorer and two-time two-time player of the year, and you can't get to the Sweet 16, and you have 2 first-round draft picks and you can't get to the Sweet 16, and you have the Big Ten's all-time leading three-point shooter and you can't get to the Sweet 16, and then you reverse it in 2016 when you're 11-1 to start the Big Ten season, and you're finally feeling like you got a shot at erasing this 45-year now absence of winning a regular season title, and you can't, and then you fall apart and you finish 12-6 in the Big Ten. And a couple years ago, you win the Big Ten tournament, and there's a euphoria, and then you lose as a 5-12 game in the first round of the tournament. You just can't expect people to keep getting on that horse and riding it. They're tired of getting bucked off, and they're like, we'll wait for the next horse.
I think we've witnessed over time, since the firing of Dr. Tom Davis. I know they tried to semantically make it more digestible. He got fired.
Yeah.
And since then, you can call it the curse of the doctor if you want. It's been a very fragile program in terms of support. after Tom Davis, there was a real spark. I've offered, he was one that people
Mhm.
wanted, got in there. There was excitement. They beat UConn. It started to build. They won a Big Ten tournament title. Then the Pierre Pierce thing happens.
Mhm.
Then Todd Licklider happens. Then, it's just been, unless it's been an extremely like 2006, unless it's a team like that,
Mhm.
there just hasn't been the support.
Mhm.
And it's kind of gone up and down. You covered the team for quite a while. It's gone up and down as we've seen through the years. And the big games they come out to or they have, like Michigan State, but that's what makes this one so alarming. Those
Mhm.
years, you would always have like games where, number five, top five Michigan State, Tom Izzo's coming in. Let's, even with Licklider, they won
Mhm.
that game, what, 25-14 or something, whatever that was.
It was
Whatever that was.
43 to 36, but it might as well have been. Yeah.
But I mean, the place was packed, right?
Yeah.
So, Fran upsets Purdue that
Yeah.
one year at home,
Yeah.
storm the court, all those things. I just wondering if we've hit another level of apathy here because I don't remember seeing this for an Iowa State game. I've been around here a
Mhm.
while. This is alarming.
It's the culmination of everything over the last 25 years, no question. And it just, you chip away, chip away, chip away, and you're like, you blink and you go, how did you get here? Well, it wasn't just one singular event. It's all the events that have led to that. Going way back, even when I wasn't living here, but I followed the program very closely when I was living in Missouri, and the Pierre Pierce thing happened. And Iowa fans that I knew that were scattered in Northwest Missouri were disgusted by it. They couldn't believe it. That they couldn't believe not only A, that it happened, that was disgusting enough, but B, that the follow-up that all of us know, he redshirted, and then there was the discussions about, well, they need to pray together and stuff. That it's like, what are you doing? And in today's era, let's face it, that would never happen. You just would not do that in today's world. But then, then it happened again with him. And so it's like, that made it even worse. And then, the '06 team, which had great people, forget the players, but, Haluska and Horner and Bruner and some of the other players were awesome people, had a great team, finished second in the Big Ten regular season by one game, won the Big Ten tournament, and had a 17-point lead they blew in a 3-14 game. And that just popped the balloon. It just went, and then the Alford era basically ended in that year because the next year he was back, but it was just like,
Going through the motions.
yeah. And then Todd, I understand why Gary hired Todd. He was the anti-Alford. He was kind of aw shucks versus high ego, and then he was also, he had a style that he thought that, okay, if we play to that style, and he was national coach of the year, and lo and behold, though, you couldn't have gotten a worse fit, and recruiting just. But all that being said, that's still 15 years ago. So what's happened since then? Fran did a nice job of reinvigorating the program. I think he tried to build it, and he built it to a certain level. But kind of where it just never crossed over was very, very rarely when you had big and important games, even in the regular season, Rob, where it was that the crowd wants to jump, and then all of a sudden they're just missing shots at the ends of the game and losing in overtime. I remember Michigan State a couple of times, and Ohio State when Aaron Kraft was there, and and fans were just getting frustrated with, why can't we get over the top? And then that era, they, again, in 2016, they're ranked as high as number 3, and then they fall apart late in the year. So that was 2 out of 3 years where they had a collapse, and then they had a dip, they've had a rebuild, and then the COVID year, you're a 2 seed and you get bounced in your second game. And it's just like, it's natural. If you have somebody who
It's
you love treats you like crap, then you just, after a while, it's like, I'm done.
and it's not like if you didn't see what happened against Northwestern State in 2006, if you didn't live through that,
Yeah.
You got a chance to live through it against Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And these the last 5 years or so, through the Luca Garza
Mm-hmm.
Murray era, again high hopes but let down,
Yeah.
upset in the NCAA tournament. So even if you didn't live through '06, we've got something for you now, and it's just a snowball effect. Everybody's experienced the disappointment.
And and I think people have found other competitive outlets to satisfy themselves that way. When you look at you constantly get frustrated because they couldn't get over the top in men's basketball. Then you look and you have the most exciting athlete in the world playing women's basketball, and they get all the way to the championship game, and then they do it again, and every game is sold out. An incredibly exhilarating, interesting style of basketball. You have in Lisa, the perfect Iowa coach. She's an Iowa girl who became an Iowa coach, who is so respectful of everything and all of her opportunities. So she just meshes so well with the fan base. And then you have an Iowa girl that has the swagger that of a modern day, but also the humility of being an Iowan. And Kate Martin is the quintessential Iowa player, even if she's from Edwardsville, Illinois. She's forever an Iowan. You had all that on this side. And I'm not saying that the same people decided to ditch the men's team for the women's team, but it's also, oh, what's going on here? So it's just this weird situation. So
Yeah, it's you can't expect what happened in women's basketball to happen for the men's team. Caitlin Clark is a generational talent. She was surrounded by other um, very engaging um, teammates. It was a phenomenon. It was the Beatles, for that sport. And that's not going to happen in the men's game. Those players have already come and gone through the years. So you got to be realistic and figure out what it's going to take. And this is, I think this is Beth's, because the volleyball team is bad, but nobody's really paying attention because it's bad and it's a Olympic sport. This is one of your revenue sports, one of your main sports that you're trying to sell. You're selling out wrestling at your arena. You're selling out women's basketball during the same time of year. But now this is happening to your men's team. And it's a big, big issue. And I don't know. I don't know what the answers are. We've talked about this from back on the good call days, back in the radio, from KXIC, back when we were at the Iowa River Landing doing radio shows 20 years ago. We were talking about this. And now it's in Beth's hands to try to fix this, and it's not going to be easy. You can change the coach. I don't think Fran deserves to be fired on merit. I think his track record is, if you compare it to the history of this program, it matches up pretty well. But you can't turn a blind eye to not being able to sell tickets. And whether that's directly Fran's fault, it's the history, it's the last, quarter century that Scott and I have talked about, those different instances that have dinged the program. None of that stuff really matters. You got to figure out how to fix it. And I'm not sure it's just wins and losses at this point.
It's not. If it was, then they'd be fine. Maybe they would struggle, selling out the early November games or something like that.
And if they were the best team in the Big Ten, I'm not talking about that. But if they've done what they've been doing, which is basically finished, top 4, top 6 in the league.
You look at the parallels between men's basketball and football. And football's had a little bit more success, but not much. I mean, they've been able to go to division titles and stuff like that. And I
think it's comparable,
but yeah,
roughly by the sports.
But when you talk to average fan who maybe has met both of them or knows a little bit about the coaches, and I'm not, saying the Ferentz fatigue of this coaching styles and stuff, but the people who actually know them, people like Kirk Ferentz as a person. When they get to know him, he treats them in a certain way that they feel they respond to. He knows their names, or he tries to know their names, or he has nice conversations with them. He has nice conversations with them at the facilities, and that resonates. He gets the benefit of the doubt from people. It's like, yeah, I'd like for him to get another quarterback or fire his kid or whatever, but by and large, they, the relationships they have with him, they kind of like. There's not the same kind of, there's a disconnect between Fran and the fan base. And I don't think you get past it. I think it's as simple as Western Pennsylvania versus Eastern Pennsylvania. And Fran has, the Philly attitude. And in Philly, it's perfect, kind of abrasive, high ego. I just want to coach basketball. At Iowa, you gotta go out, and I'm not saying kiss the babies, but you gotta slap backs, and it's one thing to do it with the intense basketball crowd, the street family or Gasser or some other people that, that they could be buddies with you, but you've got to be able to sell your program in the summer. You've got to get yourself out there. Lisa and Jan have never had a problem with that. Tom Brands has never had a problem with that. Kirk Ferentz has not had a problem with that. He doesn't necessarily like going out all the time, but he will do it, and he'll be good at it when he does it. Fran doesn't necessarily do that very well. It's just not part of his DNA, and so there's a disconnect. And so people giving him the benefit of the doubt is much less than what they do with Kirk. And, if you kind of are in a mediocre, 8-4 going to a mid-level bowl game, that's kind of the same as being a 20-21 win season and going to, being a 7, 8, 9, 10 seed in the NCAA tournament is kind of what it is. And I think that's where, coach matters and personality matters and the ability to connect with your fan base matters. And I think that's where the disconnect lies, because people, there are already a group of people, Rob, I'm probably rambling here, but that were not comfortable with a lot of his antics and rants and stuff, but they swallowed their tongues because, hey, if we win games, who cares, right? Well, when you don't win championships time after time after time, or you don't win big NCAA tournament games, then it's, I don't really like the guy, kind of comes across as an asshole. And I don't really have an attachment to it. And we're just not getting to where we want to go. And we haven't been to the Sweet 16 in 25 years. And as much as we talk about Alford and Licklider, that's almost 2 decades ago now, for the Alford era. That's 15 years ago. It's all on Fran. And
the interesting thing about it, though, Scott, and I know you've talked to Fran just casually, he could do it. He's a very engaging person. He's not the crazy guy with the red face on the sideline. That's the only time he's like that. I've sat in stands with him at high schools watching AAU stuff and just shooting the shit. Very easy to talk to. I think he could probably do it if he wanted to. I don't know. I think there's a sense of resentment there from him in a way too, with the support. It's kind of almost like I don't know what you call that. Catch 22. He's upset with the support, but he's not going to go out and help get the support because he's pissed that he's not getting. It's kind of that type of thing. And I didn't agree with much of anything Alford said when he was here, but when he said this was a football school, Iowa is a football school. They support the football program first. So then you got to figure out where you fit in after that. Wrestling is very niche. That's a group of people you're probably not going to get to come to a lot of basketball games.
Yeah.
Some do, but there's
football,
not
but not basketball. Yeah.
Football, wrestling, yes. Basketball, wrestling, not as much. So those are the obstacles that you have to overcome. It's not a state where you're going to find a lot more high school talent on the football field in Iowa than you will on the basketball court. For men's basketball, women's basketball is a little different. It's better in this state. So those are all things that you have to take into account. And then you have to evaluate, all right, is there somebody we can get to fix this? Do we help the current situation, the current regime? Do we support them and try to fix this? It's going to be difficult, but that's why Beth makes money. She's got to figure this out, but this isn't sustainable.
No, it's not, because what happens if you play the number 3 team in the country tonight on your own gym, and a quarter of the crowd, first of all, isn't there, and another quarter of the quarter that's there are in Cardinal, and then they beat your ass by 20 points. And you think that's going to bring people in that, hey, we really need to support them now? Good luck with that. That doesn't work very well. Thinking back, and it's weird because every single lob or factor can be also flipped to an excuse with basketball, like the Alford thing. I also remember them selling out for the first couple of years. And I remember his introductory press conference. I was still a very young reporter at the Muscatine Journal at the time, and I went to it. And I sat next to Glenn Worley, who was still trying to make his decision, and ended up coming to Iowa. And standing in the back of I think it was the Big Ten room for the press conference, was Kirk Ferentz, just kind of standing there, nobody paying attention to him, just standing there. All the eyes were on Alford. He blew it at Iowa. He had it and he blew it. So therefore, okay, how do you get it back? And he just kept stumbling, and those were like self-inflicted errors on his part.
Yeah.
And I think with Fran, I think you're right that, he doesn't feel appreciated enough. That, hey, this is a tough job. It is one of the tougher jobs in the Big Ten. There's no question. For all the stuff that people our age group that grew up here understood with Lute Olson and Tom Davis in the 80s, those advantages are not there. George Raveling, he would do well in today's world. Let's put it that way. I think you can kind of gauge what I'm saying of how some of those players came back.
That also, the NIL support.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. For the programs too. Well, where is that coming in? Man, wrestling did really well in the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right. And that's why you got to push on your fan base. I mean, it's up to this year. Now, next year when things change and it'll be more internal, then it's going to be completely contingent upon the athletic director, the athletic department, to figure out how do you parse this money among everybody. Does football still get a bigger share? It should. It makes the most money. And if you're bad in football, your department suffers. There's no question. You can survive a bad basketball team. You can't survive a bad football team. But when you look and your women are selling out and the engagement is off the charts and people know their names, their first names, and then some of them are still struggling to be introduced to the men's game, or they have no interest whatsoever, you got to figure something out. And, I'm not, on merit, I don't think Fran necessarily deserves to go or whatever. And I don't know if this could ever end up as an amicable solution. Otherwise, I don't know if Fran would allow it to happen. His youngest son, of course, is a senior at West High. And, but, one of his sons kind of, is now a coach at Butler and came out kind of against the fans several times, but, even to the NCAA website. And then there, Patrick transferred away from Iowa, wanted to get away from the fishbowl of Iowa City. I don't know if it's been as intense as maybe they have portrayed it, or as negative as they portrayed it. It has been negative. And then Jack, of course, had a serious issue off the floor or, in life. If I've ever seen a situation where if two people can have an agreeable divorce and both be better off, it's probably this one.
Yeah. And Peyton Sanford he's too nice to take a shot at the fans. But earlier this year, when he talked about the Washington State game and playing more games in the Quad Cities, that was a red flag as well. And it just was another season where we're going through the same thing. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how they fill up, or how the arena is filled up and divvied up tonight in terms of fans. We've seen historically the Orange Crush has infiltrated the facility. Could have a situation like that. We'll see. They've tried to do things to try to prevent other schools from buying tickets. But if I'm Iowa, I sell as many tickets as I can for this game. I don't care who you're selling them to. We'll see. Look forward to the game. As we said, it's going to be a tough game for Iowa. We're not going to break it down because, again, the game's in whatever, hours or something like that. So probably a good time for us to take a break, and we'll come back and talk about some football with y'all. Support for this podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Let's hear from a few more sponsors. Scott and I will be back on the other side to talk some Hawk football. Hang tight. And welcome back to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Did you know switching is easy? We do it all the time. We switch on the lights, we switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch. But what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch, right here in Iowa, can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give them a call when you want the real deal. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Hardcore Hawk fans got to have a Kinnick Scoreboard Entertainment Center. Contact Fanatics Furniture at 319-750-0005 or KNICK3615 at gmail.com. Scoreboard Entertainment Centers. Be hardcore. 319-750-0005 or KNICK3615 at gmail.com. And Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City, owned and operated by the Perez brothers. You remember them probably from El Banditos and Perez Tacos. Excellent establishment. Good friend of mine, Jesse Villalobos, will be playing live there Friday night, December 20th. Go check him out. Rhythm and Blues. Good stuff at Black Angel. Go check him out. Former roommate of mine. He could probably tell you some stories that I do not want told when we lived in downtown Iowa City when I moved here. All right, Scott. Can you think of a better? You probably can, but there aren't many better quarterback names than Hank Brown. I mean, that's a quarterback. Hank Brown.
Man.
That's a quarterback name. Auburn transfer. Visiting here today, the first one through town here. We'll see if he ends up being the guy. Thoughts on him?
Well, I'm sure he's probably like, man, it's cold here. It's like if you're trying to sell your program to somebody, the last thing you want is it for to be 9 degrees and windy and stuff. But
yeah,
people. But no, I think, from what I've viewed, he has the potential to be a really good fit here. Now, I won't say, wow, they got a home run here, even if he lands, because he's got to realize that potential and grow with it. But he's got the skill set that I know Tim Lester is probably looking for, and it's certainly necessary because I think they've had a total of 9 quarterbacks hit the portal in the last 3 years. Everything from the Brian Ferentz era is gone at that position group. In fact, every single quarterback going through Brian's tenure as OC is gone. It went through the portal, including Spencer Petras as a grad transfer. So, but specifically with Hank Brown, he's got all the attributes you're looking for. I think he's a Chicagoland kid. He went to Lipscomb Academy and Nashville. He, has got a good arm, very accurate, poised, tough. High character from what it sounds like. Can run the ball, not necessarily a runner, but can run. I would say Brendan Sullivan's a better runner than he is, but he's also, maybe in the a little bit higher than Beathard as a runner. So that's not bad. So, what you've got to ask yourself as for Iowa is, what are you going to tell him? Because he's looking for an opportunity to play. He played, started a couple of games, played in a few others.
Let's see here.
I think
He played in the Music City Bowl against Maryland last year.
He had a good game.
7 of 9, 132. They played three quarterbacks in that game. They lost 31-13 to Maryland, and he appeared in four games this year.
Yeah.
27 of 43, 403 yards, six touchdowns with three picks. Auburn was 5-7.
Mm-hmm.
Unsettled there. Is it Philip Montgomery, the offensive coordinator that recruited him
Mm-hmm.
in 23, was fired after one season. So there was a new offensive coordinator this season. So a lot of this stuff goes on around the country. You think you're
Mm-hmm.
going to a place. I mean, look at Marco, and we'll get to him in a
Yeah.
minute. I mean, he came here thinking he was going to play in Brian Ferentz's offense, and then boom, it switched around.
Yeah.
Same for James Reeser,
Mm-hmm.
didn't work, and down the line. But um, I wonder if this is the only guy that they
Yeah.
would get out of the portal, because this looks like a guy that would compete with Sullivan
Mm-hmm.
for the job, right?
Exactly. And here's his two games that he played a lot of snaps in this year. Tells you what you're working with. It doesn't mean throw them away, but it means, I wouldn't say even be skeptical, but I'd say be curious about. When they played New Mexico, he had 4 touchdown passes. He was
Right.
17 to
I
25.
watched that film. He looked
Yeah.
like free John
Mhm.
Elway.
Yeah, I was like, okay, that's the kind of oh wow, we could get this guy. That's what fans
Yeah.
should be thinking is. And then you look at him playing Arkansas, a legitimate SEC defense, 3 interceptions, no touchdowns, and he looked out of sorts. Like, we've seen this before, and we don't want this. That's kind of what you're dealing with. And then you look at how he played against Maryland last year. He looked okay. I thought he looked good in the bowl game, in fact. So, what you got to tell yourself, and if you're Iowa or a fan, but let's start with the Iowa football angle, is do you expect him to come in and be number one? And I would say I expect you to come in and compete to be number one. I would not give him number one, because you are a Big Ten school. Auburn won 3 less games than you are, and you would beat Auburn today. So don't give into that. However, if you think he has a lot of potential, and I compare it to the Luke Altmaier situation. He was at Ole Miss. He was kind of in the same ballpark at Ole Miss. They went out and they got Jackson Dart from USC, which anybody should do. And Jackson Dart's a tremendous quarterback. Okay, where does that leave me? A couple years now trying to make this up. So he went to Illinois. First year was okay, not bad. This year he was really good. He was probably one of the 4 or 5 best quarterbacks in the Big Ten. If you've got that kind of potential, and you could combine him with Brendan Sullivan, and maybe you say, maybe they could do something inventive, which they did a little bit this year, is play them both. There's no, this depends on the situation, who's in there, and kind of play them both and allow Hank Brown to kind of grow as a quarterback and gain confidence and put him in advantageous situations without being the most, spotlight shown on him on a really difficult schedule. And then you also have a veteran like Brendan Sullivan, who I think he seems to be the kind of guy that would be, if he's guaranteed to have some packages, I think he looks like he'd probably stay. Then I think
that's right. You're kind of juggling both here. What are you telling the guy you're recruiting in the portal, and then what do you tell Stratton and Sullivan?
Yeah,
who both played this year. Where do they stand? So it's a lot of, but I think the Iowa coaches are pretty transparent when it comes to this thing. And I think, maybe they tell Hank Brown, listen, you're going to have to compete with Brendan Sullivan. And he has an opportunity to go and be the number one guy somewhere, and he picks somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll say this, if you've got somebody who's a current redshirt freshman who's been inconsistent and shown potential and comes here and expect to a Big Ten institution that's pretty good and expects to be number one without giving a competition, then he's not the guy you want.
That's a good point.
Go to Tulane, go to UAB, go somewhere else. You can have your stuff there. We'll go get somebody who we want to be a competitor, that's anxious about getting into it, about being a good teammate, about competing, and then about winning games. And if you are, because the good players want to compete. Now, 5 stars are a little different, and elite transfers are a little different. Like if you're talking to Miller Moss, yeah, you guarantee he's going to play, just like you did Cade McNamara.
The
You
kid that
know,
was at Texas A&M committed to Houston, right? Last night?
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Connor Wigman. So
Because he
that's,
was tied to Iowa initially, right?
yeah, he was one that was kind of, his name was bantered
Yeah.
about.
Because
So,
Iowa showed interest, because why wouldn't you?
yeah, exactly. You should just cast a wide net and,
Yeah.
you know,
But be realistic, like we talked
mhm,
about last week. And I think Hank Brown is realistic.
mhm. And, I don't know all the inside baseball in this because I've been kind of doing other stuff, but, I guess there is a connection there with Lester and Hank
I
Brown
wonder.
and being in the Chicagoland or something. They know each other or they
Hmm.
know of each other or something like that. So, that connection helps. He's on campus. He's, and if he commits, he needs to, then it's time to get to work and understand this is what has made Iowa a very competitive program for a long, long time is that they want good players, but they expect them to compete every day. And the best ones continue to get better even after they've solidified their position. I mean, Jay Higgins, as good as he is and as good as he was last year, continues to get better because he competes every single day. And that's the same deal I see with if you could get Hank Brown in, and this would be if they don't go to the portal to get anybody else, and if they look and they say, okay, I think we're set here, we're going to bring back Brendan, we're going to have him compete with Hank Jackson. We really like your position here. Right now you're third, but as you saw, anything can happen. We like your trajectory. We want to keep you. Maybe we'll even put you on scholarship. And then Jimmy Sullivan, you're enrolling in January. There's a reason why Tim Lester decided to keep you because he could have just said, I think we're going to go in a different direction. And there should be no fault in that. No, he was and thought he was really good. He thought he would fit exactly what he's looking for. He's enrolling early. So then if you go into January and you say, okay, we've got a senior who started in the bowl game who we like. We got a young guy who we feel like has a really good path here. Jackson Stratton. I mean, let's say, what is his option anyway? If he decides, you know what, I'm not going to get a chance to compete and I mean, where are you going to go?
Yeah,
There's
he might be able to go FCS or something like that based on what he did at Iowa this year if he wants to go down to do that. But I mean, he left Colorado State. He
yeah,
was committed to Washington, I think,
yeah,
initially.
yeah.
So
And I would say the same thing to him that, that we saw,
yeah,
which is you won two games. You're a part of two winning teams. And you know what? You didn't make any mistakes. And he's showed he has a great live arm. He competes. He's a good teammate. He almost won the UCLA game, just so come back. You're our number three, but that doesn't mean you can't compete and get up higher. And
yep.
then it's Jimmy Sullivan. Hey, you're a true freshman. Just absorb as much as you can, compete. But, if you're number two, like they did with Nate Stanley when they vaulted him over Tyler Wiegers, we'll push you where you need to be. And if you're better than Hank Brown, you'll play over him. So I think if they can go into it with that kind of a situation, then I think that's tolerable. The other path, and probably one I'd be safer with, is go out and lay seven figures and go get Miller Moss. But that takes money, and sometimes they don't have it.
And it's not I mean, it's the most glaring and important need for this team, but it's
Yeah.
not the only one.
Right.
I mean, they're obviously going after corner,
Uh-huh. Yeah. I
which
mean,
is smart.
same deal. If you've got players on your roster who would be offended that you were going to go out to get a corner, okay, well, go find somewhere else then, because nobody outside of Jamari played at a very high level this year. They played good at times, but there's a lot of inconsistencies.
Similar to quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Similar to Sullivan and Stratton.
Yeah.
Had good moments, but inconsistent.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that Deshaun Lee, TJ Hall, John Nestor, even, Jalen Watson, who played as a true freshman, I'm not saying they can't get there because we've seen that too many times to discount it.
A
Phil's,
lot.
I mean, a lot of guys, Jamari among them, just kind of all of a sudden, Michael Ojemudia, they're just kind of,
Riley Moss from the first
yeah,
time at Minnesota.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, guys get better.
And they get better and then they become league guys. And so one or two of them could do the same thing. or, but
That's the thing though with the portal. Do you want to bet on that or do you want to get a sure thing? And
mhm,
that's what you're saying. Do you get they obviously think they need to supplement it cornerback. Um, and then what do you do at quarterback?
yeah.
Do you put that money out and say, all right, we're going to get a guy, or do you say, listen, we did this once already. The guy didn't work out and we got stuck.
Mhm,
So yeah, it's not easy. It's not an easy decision. It's like professional sports.
mhm.
You've got to figure out what you want to do with the money you have available to you.
Exactly. And this is why you may not want to, but you gotta have faith in your OC,
Yeah.
because Lester's pulled off the road. He's not recruiting. That's Tyler Barnes. Now they can do that. They designate their recruiters, and he's not one of them because all he's going to do is work on the offense. And, okay, that's smart because OC was really only recruiting quarterback anyway. And I mean, they could always identify him and bring him in, and he could be there to work with them on campus or whatever, before they do something.
And
But
most of the time, Kirk doesn't like to have his coordinators out a ton anyway. Phil
yeah,
doesn't do a ton on the road. I
yeah,
mean, Brian and Greg Davis and weren't out on the road. O'Keefe probably the most because he enjoyed it. I think he enjoyed the free trips back east.
yeah, right. It's like, hey, I'll go to Connecticut, see some buddies, check out some. But the funny part is, there's been a few years there. I'm like, you really need to have more people out.
Yeah.
Especially, hate to say it, when Norm was especially in kind of decline. That
Yeah.
it kind of hurt them. I thought, you look at their recruiting rankings and they could have used all hands on deck back in the 2011 area,
Yeah.
stuff like that. But I digress. I think right now you kind of devise your strategy. And if your OC, the guy that you're entrusting with this offense, says, sure, we could go get Miller Moss or Connor Wigman before he committed to A&M or somebody like that, but it's a short time situation. They were put in a situation and they weren't as successful as they probably should have been. And here's why. We like this guy. Yes, he's young, he's inexperienced, but he's performed well in certain junctures. And other times he's made mistakes, but he seems to understand why he made those. That's conversations you have to have. And he's got everything we're looking for. He's tough-minded, high character, good arm, good accuracy. Trent Dilfer talked worlds about him. He coached him at Lipscomb. If you could feel like you got that, and you can have a couple of years, 2 to 3 years with a guy like that, then it's probably worth the investment, rather than a 1-year rental and then cross your fingers that Jimmy Sullivan's the next guy. And then when you find out he isn't, which is the case with every quarterback they've had since Nate Stanley, then you're like, okay, we got to go back into the portal again and again and again. I mean,
That's kind of what Minnesota's doing, right?
yeah, yeah. And they got another guy from Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Had,
They got Brosmer for 1 year and now
yeah.
the kid from Georgia Tech. So I don't know. Is that what they do every year? Just bring a guy in that's got 1 year of eligibility?
I think that they're in the same boat as Iowa,
Yeah.
which is when you don't grow your quarterbacks, or their quarterbacks you do grow leave, it leaves you with this opening. And then you got to figure out, all right, do we have a guy who's going to start and be good, or do we got to go get some? Well, we better go get somebody. Okay. And you play this game over and over. Iowa has to do the same thing. And again, I'm not necessarily pounding the table. Hank Brown's going to be the next CJ Beathard or Brad Banks or something like that, because he could flop. I'll be honest with you. He could have a bad year. Maybe Stratton's better and he outperforms him in every aspect, or, whatever. Or you trust your OC who's watching this and knows it a lot more than any of us do. And he's like, he's got everything I'm looking for. I identified him early, and here's why we're gonna go ahead and attack this.
Yeah. And I know it's like what have you done for me lately? Can you give me now? But I mean, it wouldn't be the worst thing if Hank Brown comes here, loses the job to Brendan Sullivan because he's got more experience in the offense, at least initially. And then maybe, as you said, you incorporate Brown into games this year. And then he's your guy in 26.
Mm-hmm.
And you've had a year of being able to develop him and get him ready for that. That's what Iowa has to start doing. There's got to be some development here. Or you do what Minnesota does and just bring a new guy in every year. And I don't think you want to live that way.
No, what's weird, Rob, is from 08 through 22, there was incredible stability at that position.
Yeah.
With Rick Stanzi, 3-year starter. James Vandenberg, 2-year starter. Rudock was a 2-year starter and would have been a 3-year starter, but then because of CJ Beathard being a 2-year starter, and then Stanley 3, Petras even 3, and you had that era whereas and until what 2021, the end of 2021 when Petras got hurt, there was a stretch there of about 150 games or some number, 130, 150. I'd have to count it up, where quarterbacks only missed one start at Iowa, and that was Rudock at Purdue in 14, and Beathard played in it. Otherwise, no matter if CJ Beathard's
I was thinking about Beathard's this when he ran it in.
Yeah.
And got in trouble. He ran the touchdown in when he wasn't supposed to. That was classic CJ. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. It's just what it it is, but it's been a lot of volatility in the last few years. And and I was thinking about this the other day, because when you think back to even the 2020 season, and that was a good team. That's one that's going to get overlooked, but if they had a chance to get in a tournament, or if they had a chance to get into play a couple more games, maybe get into Big Ten championship game or something like that, that was a team that could have made some noise. And you look at the offense, and Amir Smith-Marset, one of the best kick returners in the NFL. Brandon Smith's on the Jets practice team. Tyrone Tracy's going to cross 1,000 yards rushing this year. He's on pace for it anyway.
Great story.
Yeah. Charlie Jones, 4th wide receiver, punt returner for the Cincinnati Bengals. Sam Laporta, pretty good tight end. I think we've all heard of him. Tyler Goodson scored a touchdown this year for the Indianapolis Colts and is their 3rd running back. They had a left tackle on that team, Alaric Jackson, been a multi-year left tackle starter in the NFL. Tyler Linderbaum, Pro Bowler. It's
pretty good.
Why? They did average like 30, almost 32 points a game, but it still felt incomplete, and so mainly the year before, because they did have most of those same pieces too.
Yeah, it looked, you watched how 19 ended with the game against USC in the Holiday Bowl, and then how that offense really kicked in 20 towards the end, and how great that team was playing at the end of the season, and then it just it blew up.
Yeah.
In 21 and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, like the midpoint, they won 12 straight games to end 20 and to begin in 21. And then that Purdue game, it just went. And then it was like, oh my God, what is going on here? There's nothing here. And that goes back to scheme. It goes back to putting your players in position. You look at Tyrone Tracy and all the success he's having at the NFL. And, I've heard people say, well, yeah, but they said that he probably should be a running back. Well, then make him a running back. Or if he doesn't want to be one and he wants to be a slot receiver, make him a slot receiver. They played him out of position as the X. Why do you want him to try to win one-on-one coverage all the time playing against, that's not his position. He's better quick movement, and
putting your guys in the best position to succeed. Whether it's Tyrone, Charlie Jones didn't get his opportunities here. The receiver core, obviously, as you said, was better than it is now. Charlie Jones would be the number 1 here, obviously, but should have gotten more run and didn't. But that's what you hope. I mean, the hope here is that Kirk, and I know Chad Lysico reported that this is Tim Lester's offense. Kirk's getting out of the way. We'll see. Kirk is still involved, and I'm not hung up on that as much as I used to be. When Brian was here, I think, if Lester and Kirk it seems like they're on the same page. Just they need to get the pieces in place. The running game's back. Tim came up with the mid-zone run. I think that probably ingratiated him a little bit more with Kirk's like, wow, all right. So I think we're going in the right direction, but this is the piece, right? You got to figure out the quarterback spot.
You have to. It's the one that's been very elusive, and it is strange when you think about it from Stanzi through Stanley, the 5 quarterbacks there. 4 of them got drafted.
Yeah.
And one, Vandenberg got ruined, but he was on a pace to be drafted at one point. So there's opportunity here. I think they've got a chance. But the other thing is, and maybe this is Kirk admitting something to himself on this, is you're going to have to be better on offense, not just because you have to be better, but you have to be better when you have that defense that's losing as many pieces. Now you can go to the portal, you can expect guys to grow. Maybe it's a player like I don't know, Max Llewellyn goes from being a pretty good player to wow player or something like that. That's fine, but you're going to have to expect that this defense isn't going to be able to compete at the elite level that it had. This year was very good.
It carried them.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, the
Mhm.
two Big Ten championship game appearances were because of the defense and
Yeah.
special teams.
Right. And they may have been the best in the year in the middle.
Yeah.
That the 22 year when they barely missed the championship, but that team with that offense, just with Jack Campbell and Lucas Van Ness and some of
Yeah.
I mean, that was a elite level defense. Kayvon Merriweather was really good and stuff. So
And
but
Iowa's
that
going to be good they're not going to be trash on defense, and they're going to be good on defense and special teams, but it's the complementary football. Your offense has to give you more
Mhm.
to the equation because you cannot expect your defense and special teams to be the best in the country every year. There's going to be a little bit of a drop off. There was this year, and there's still top 15 in scoring defense?
Yeah.
It's still a good defense.
Right. It's like we threw our hands up over, and rightly so with the Michigan State UCLA run defense. It
Yeah.
was like, what's going on here? But, particularly the UCLA game, they gave up 20 points. You should be able to outscore them. A team that didn't make it to a bowl game, the same thing and the Michigan State game. Well, you couldn't sustain a drive, an offense in the first half at all. It was a dreadful performance offensively, and they're still holding them to field goals for what they scored 15 points in the first half, and all of them were on field goals because Aiden Childs was playing his ass off, but you couldn't do anything to help your defense. And then finally, I mean, again, you may be better than them, but after a while, if they're wearing on you, you feel it, and then they're confident, and it's like wrestling your brother or somebody or your best friend, and maybe you win more of them, but some days they just get the best of you, and that's kind of the same way there, and so next year you can't be prepared for this to be an elite level defense with all those departures. They can build themselves into that position, but you just can't prepare for it because you might have to get in a couple of shootouts. You might have to get into games where you score 30 because they score 30 and in order to be competitive. And we haven't seen that for a long, long time. Now they've scored 40 points at home four out of the 7 times and 38 another time. But, the Nebraska and Iowa State games are ones where we saw woeful deficiencies. And those are the games that lead you to the championships or the playoffs, not just, Music City Bowls.
Yeah, you need to have an offense that threatens the other team. The other team matches up against your defense, like Scott said, and they're going to score points. You're going to see, next year, USC is going to score points. Oregon's going to score points. Penn State's going to score points. You got to score points next year and beyond. And there has to be more balance between the 3 phases for complementary football, especially now. You could get away with it in the Big Ten West. You're not getting away with it in the 18-team, no division Big Ten.
Yeah. If you want to go to the championship game, you're not, because you can still beat half the teams.
Right.
With that strategy because you're better than they are, you're more disciplined than they are, have better technique, all those types of things, as you said, the Big Ten West, because the floor was high, the ceiling was low, and Iowa and Wisconsin, to a lesser extent, Minnesota and Illinois, and even Northwestern, kind of dictated the tempo of the division.
Yep.
That we're going to play line of scrimmage, football, physical football, risk averse football, and you got to beat us. And but when you're playing Penn State and Oregon and Ohio State with the same regularity as almost all those other teams, you've got to be prepared to outscore them once in a while. And are they capable of it? Maybe. I mean, let's see. I mean, Kirk's last phase of his career, his most recent phase, has been pretty good, except for that offensive component. I mean, they're winning games, they're competing, they're keeping their players, they're doing all the things you really want to do. It's just that, scoring. It's like talk about complimentary football. What I think of is last Thursday night, the Lions were completely depleted on defense. They were just they had nothing left. All these guys were hurt. It's a Thursday night game, so they're all banged up anyway.
Yeah.
And it was tied, and they had 45 seconds left. It was like 4th and 1. Kick the field goal, right? Well, Dan Campbell knew enough about his team, and I mean, believe me, I was like, "Whoa, what are you doing here?" But they're going to go for it so they can milk every second off the clock and win the game that way because to protect his defense. And just like Iowa has done that, especially the last 3 to 4 years, it's protected its defense by punting or protected its offense by putting the defense on the field. So
Yeah.
it's got to be yin and yang. You can't just constantly say, "Hey, it's all on you guys to shovel out the barn."
Hank Brown is he's the man of the hour in terms of the transfer portal, but a lot of other news there this week since we last talked on the Hotspot podcast. We talked about Marco Lainez transferring out. That was kind of the big news of the transfers out, but you had Caden Crawford. Do you have a list of guys? There were walk-ons too. I know Jalen Thompson, tight end.
Yeah.
Brent Friedrichsen was a walk. There's a lot of walk-ons, and as we've talked about on the podcast, the goal is they have to get down to 105. So you're going to lose the walk-ons. They're going to end up trying to go and find places where rosters are also reduced. So good luck to those guys. Hopefully they all find homes. But then we talk about retention too, Scott. I'm just going to fold all this into one. Logan Jones deciding to come back, enormous.
Mm-hmm.
First team All Big Ten center. Gives you a different complexion now of your offensive line. You're not replacing the guy in the middle of that. And now you have, 3 starters back, basically. And, Cade Pieper, too, who got his feet wet this year. Different complexion on the offensive line going into 2025 with Logan coming back.
No question. And, here's kind of the list of the names, the scholarship guys for the most part. As we know, with Cade McNamara and LaShawn, who picked Memphis, then Kansas. So he's Kansas. Jeff Bowie, who left late in the year. Rusty Van Wetzing, he's a walk-on, but he played some at fullback. And James Rezar, and when he's talking, this is by no means meant as a slight to James, okay? But he's from Jacksonville, Florida. He committed to Iowa in 2022. By the time he got onto campus, I think everybody realized that maybe the fit wasn't quite there, and they moved him wide receiver almost immediately. Talk about misidentification of quarterback. That's the worst case. I mean, you're better off probably going with some of the guys, in West Des Moines Dowling or something like that, and picking somebody up. Johnny Pascuzzi, and again, second time in the portal. This time he'd probably go. Grant Leaper, Lainez, as you said, Caden Crawford. He was probably one that maybe surprised me a little bit, but he just, he was in that third team realm, and it's hard to get out of it. And Chase Brackney, who really wasn't rising above scout team. He was struggling to get on the scout team even. And then Caleb Brown, which we know about from a while ago. So, those are numbers, those are names. Wish them the best. There's some people going, "Oh my gosh, what's going on over there?" This is happening everywhere. Let me put it in, if you look at Purdue's exits, it's pretty much the whole team. At Marshall, I guess it is pretty much the whole team.
They fired the coach and the team went in the portal.
Yeah, they won the championship and they didn't extend him. So he went to Southern Miss, and now the whole team went in the portal.
Yeah, crazy. There's still guys that are figuring this out, and roster management now trying to, when we had the signing day press conference a few weeks ago and talking about trying to figure out how to get to 105, and because now you're trying to do right by these guys too and try to get them to spots because they can't be here anymore because there's no room for them. So now you're kind of charged with trying to find homes for these guys, and it all circles back to the NCAA again.
Mhm.
They're the ones that got us in this position and screwed this thing up. Um, and we'll see what happens here. It's still evolving. It's the first year we've had to get to 105 and see this. So I think it's going to play out all the way till next season, Scott. There's another portal in the spring. There's spring football. This it used to be okay. February, first Wednesday in February, signing days. We'll find out who the new Hawkeyes are, right? And then maybe
Mhm.
get a JUCO in there or something like that. Now it's all year round.
Right. Exactly. It's turned into like the NFL where it never ends. Um, Now, what's been different, and I think at least at Iowa they've been excited about is the coaches are grounded this month. Which really is a good thing, because now with the portal, they can have conversations, frank, honest, transparent conversations with their current players, and they're not going and recruiting or trying
Yeah.
to hold on to their class or whatever. It's already signed. It's gone. You can look ahead a little bit, but then you can also bring in the portal guys and you can have conversations with them on campus, and then you can also, God forbid, actually coach them, for the bowl game coming up. Yeah, so it's an interesting period, but then, yeah, it's going to ramp up again. And I know there has been a lot of discussion about shrinking or even eliminating the spring portal period. I would caution against that. I think that's a losing discussion. I think that's not fair, first of all.
No.
I mean, and the NCAA has never been fair. They've only been fair when they've had to be fair because the judge told them to be fair. And this is another situation where you look at, let's say Brennan Sullivan, for instance. He says, all right, good. I'll be back. I'll compete. And then you get, and you're going into your last year, and then all of a sudden you realize he's better than I am. I'm not going to play. Then there's your opportunity. Now you're going to shut that down.
He
Come on.
went through spring at Northwestern last year.
Right. Well,
Didn't like how he felt, and then
he started
well,
doing it there, yeah, and then shut it down in the
yeah,
spring and went to the portal, and he made a good decision for himself. And I think that should be fair. And it's not so much as somebody like that as it is, you look at the guys approaching their junior year. I always
mhm.
think that's where you get that spot where you've had 2 to 3 years of kind of build, and then you kind of evaluate where you are and be self-aware with your efforts. And if you're going into year 4 and you're not on the depth chart, and maybe you're not close to being on the depth chart, then you've got to evaluate where you are, your position with the team, and where your position is. What's important to you. Is it, what, I see that I'm probably not the player that I wanted to be. I'll try to get there, but I'm going to compete, but I'm going to get a good degree, and I like my team and I like where I live. Okay, that's fair. But then you also have the flip side of that, which is, what, football is really important to me. I've only got a couple more years left of this, and I still want to go to the NFL. I don't have a chance if I don't play. So then you go from being, the 11th best defensive back at Iowa to Eastern Illinois or Northern Iowa, and you got a chance to start. It's hard to turn that down too. So I think, but a lot of times you don't know that until the spring, going into that
Yeah.
year, because when all the seniors are gone, and especially in this case with all the COVID situations, that the COVID, guys are, except for Logan Jones and maybe Ethan Herkett, are all gone. So, I think that's fair, is to allow them an opportunity to see where they are and make a smart decision for themselves.
Yeah, I think it just makes sense after the regular season ends in December, and then after spring football ends, just have
Mhm.
portals at those spots because that's really when you're getting evaluated and kind of getting an idea of where you stand
Mhm.
in that team, like Scott said. So, all right, folks, I think we've exhausted our time here today. Again, Iowa basketball, men's basketball tonight against number 3 Iowa State. That is a 6:30 tip thankfully, instead of 8 o'clock last night. It makes it even colder.
Yeah.
That's on FS1, like the game was last night. And then Sunday, you get a doubleheader on the Big Ten Network, Iowa, Michigan State women at 11 a.m. And then the men are in Carver against New Orleans at 1 p.m. So you get back-to-back Hawks on the Big Ten Network on Sunday. And wrestling, I believe, is off until the Soldier Salute at the end of this month. So nothing really going on with them at the moment. So that's your schedule for this week. All right. All right, folks. Hopefully everybody has a good rest of their week. Stay warm out there today. If you're in Iowa, it's cold as heck. I took the dogs out this morning, so do that. And we'll talk to you again next week. We'll have plenty to talk about. Maybe we'll have Hank Brown news. Who knows? Come back and join us on the Hotspot podcast, won't you? We'll see you then. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.